Hey y'all! So today we're going to start chapter 8 in the book Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. And this is going to be a really interesting chapter. I'm really excited to present it to you and to go back through it myself as well. So the title of chapter 8 is Self-Preservation, Identifying Leg Traps, Cages, and Poisoned Bait. And just in the introduction here, I'm about to read some of it to you. It kind of, I think it's applicable to those of us who have come out of a narcissistic entanglement, specifically because it's in reference to how your natural instincts have been tampered with, and how in the beginning, when you're freshly out of a narcissistic environment or relationship, you may not really have your footing good yet, and your instincts have not been returned yet. So it's kind of like that early stage is when you're most susceptible to being caught up again in a narcissistic exploitation, of some kind. So I think that, a lot of times we have a natural, this is kind of cool. I'm going to go back to the instinct. It's like when we get out of it, we have this natural instinct to want to be alone, to self-isolate. And a lot of that's due to, we have to go through a healing process, really absorbing everything we went through, trying to make sense of it, and healing in the process. And it's just natural to want to do that in isolation, right? So that's good, because the other layer to isolation is that we are also protecting ourselves in that manner, so it serves multiple purposes to, kind of just be to yourself and kind of withdraw into that protective shell for a little while. It serves a lot of different good purposes for us and reasons for us. So that's kind of what I think this chapter is going to speak to, and then it goes into a really interesting story as well. So let's dive in. So the first part, and remember, she as she goes through the chapters, she will kind of give different sections within the chapter its own name. So the first section is called The Feral Woman. It says in the Oxford English Dictionary, the word feral derives from Latin fer, F-E-R, meaning beast. Wild beast. In common usage, a feral creature is one who was once wild, then domesticated, and who has reverted back to a natural or untamed state once again. The feral woman is one who was once in a natural psychic state, that is, in her rightful wild mind, then later was captured by whatever turn of events. So this would be that narcissistic entanglement. Thereby becoming overly domesticated and deadened in proper instincts. When she has opportunity to return to her original wildish nature, she too easily steps into all manner of traps and poisons. Because her cycles and protective systems have been tampered with, she is at risk in what used to be her natural wild state. No longer wary and alert, she easily becomes prey. There is a specific pattern to the loss of instinct. It is essential to study this pattern, to actually memorize it, so that we can guard the treasures of our basic natures and those of our daughters as well. In the psychic woods, there are many leg traps made of rusted iron that lie just below the leafy green of the forest floor. Psychologically, the same is true of the greater world. There are various lures to which we are susceptible. Relationships, people, and ventures that are tempting, but inside that good-looking bait is something sharpened to a point, something that kills our spirit as soon as we bite into it. And doesn't that resonate? If you've been entangled with a narcissist, that has to resonate, right? Unfortunately. So then she goes into talking about feral women of all ages, and how we have this innate drive, this tenacity, this resolve to be, strong and to push through. It's just kind of like part of our nature, which is beautiful. But it can also, this is my words here, it can also if we think we're doing the right thing to stay committed and to push through a relationship, if it's not a good relationship, if it's a situation that's detrimental to our health and our well-being, then it can actually work against us, So that's where you have to really have that discernment. Because she says, they are endangered by excessive and mindless striving toward people and goals that are not nurturant, substantive, or enduring. And it says there's cages always waiting. So there's traps, left and right. And we just have to, as we navigate this world, which, a lot of us sometimes refer to it as the devil's playground, right? As we navigate that, we have to be discerning. We have to be wise. And so let me go into this next section here. It says, if you have ever been captured, if you have ever endured hambre del alma, I'm sure I didn't pronounce that correctly, but I'm trying, a starvation of the soul. If you have ever been trapped, and especially if you have a drive to create, it is likely that you have been or are a feral woman. The feral woman is usually extremely hungry for something soulful, and often will take any poison disguised on a pointed stick, believing it to be the thing for which her soul hungers. And that's what a narcissist does to you. They deprive you of your essence. They strip that from you methodically, intentionally, and sometimes you'll even watch them transform into you. It's very bizarre to experience, and it's almost like a stolen identity to the max, like a for real stolen self. And so and then you're left just feeling, she says, starved. And that's where it's dangerous, because you can have someone else swoop in, another narcissist who may see you in this injured and vulnerable state, and then exploit you even further, making you think that they're there to help you. You know what I'm saying? So this can come through friendships, or business opportunities, where you might get entangled and lose a lot of money. There's so many different ways this could happen, and different ways this can look. So it's just something to keep in mind, because you're not at your most alert, sharpest state when you're first exiting these narcissistic entanglements. So just want us, all to be very careful when you're in that state. That's why that isolation is kind of crucial, in my opinion. But not, not to the point that, we all need someone to talk to, so I'm not saying like don't reach out to a therapist or anything like that. I think that can be very helpful if it's the right therapist or the right coach. And you have to be discerning there too, because it can wind up hurting you even further and causing more damage and causing you to gaslight yourself even further. And what you want to do is get back to the point where you trust yourself again, where that connection to that inner guiding light has been restored. And that's what we want, So it says, though some feral women veer away from traps at the last moment with only minor losses of fur, far more stumble into them unwittingly, knocked temporarily senseless, while others are broken by them, and still others manage to disentangle themselves and drag themselves off to a cave to nurse their injuries alone. And remember, this can apply to men too. Nobody's not susceptible. Men and women are both susceptible to being exploited, obviously, taken advantage of, and harmed by a narcissist. It says, in order to avoid the snares and enticements that are tripped by a woman's time spent in capture and famine, we must be able to see them in advance and sidestep them. We have to redevelop insight and caution. We have to learn to veer. To be able to see the right turns, we have to be able to see the wrong ones. So that's where I also want us to be careful, because as you have exited, you have done a lot of introspection and just examining your whole experience just for learning purposes, for discernment, to increase your discernment as you're going through this process, likely in isolation. At some point you want to understand that, you don't have to operate in fear. There are, as she says, right turns that you can make. But first, you have to know the wrong ones so that you avoid those. It's kind of like a backwards way of approaching what's right for us sometimes. And but the cool thing is, I think that it's kind of like when you're naive, when you're operating in that manner, very naive in the world, because you haven't had any of these experiences. Like maybe you're young, not necessarily though, just depending on the circumstances. You know, I think that even the right turns you're not going to be as sure about as you would be after you've experienced these things and you really understand what the wrong turns are, the traps are. I think that's going to make those right decisions and right turns even more clear to us, which is beautiful. It's a beautiful gift. So there's good things that come out of this in the end, you know. So then she goes into a fairy tale, a story that is rich with lessons, right? And she talks about how she says there's an old women's teaching tale about the plight of the starved and feral woman. And she says it's got different names depending on the, you know, the area it comes from, the culture. And sometimes it's called the devil's dancing shoes, or the red hot shoes of the devil, the red shoes. And so then she talks about the version she's going to share with us is from her aunt. And she says, in her version of the tale, she always began by saying, "Look at your shoes and be thankful they are plain, for one has to live very carefully if one's shoes are too red." And so there's a lot of symbolism in this story, and I'm just going to I'm going to read parts of it to you and summarize the other parts, but I hope you enjoy it. So it's called The Red Shoes. It says, once there was a poor motherless child who had no shoes, but the child saved cloth scraps wherever she found them, and over time sewed herself a pair of red shoes. They were crude, but she loved them. They made her feel rich, even though her days were spent gathering food in the thorny woods until far past dark. And so she talks about one day she was, you know, trudging down the road in her rags, and this old woman pulled up next to her in a carriage, and she was wealthy, and she offered to adopt the orphan girl. So she went with her, and she gave her fresh clothes, you know, really nice clothes, and the girl started to ask about, you know, where her clothes were that she had on when she was adopted, when she was found, because they were, you know, special to her. It was all she had. And so the old woman says, you know, they were so dirty and filthy, I just, you know, threw them in the fire and they're gone, you know, including those red shoes that she had fashioned for herself out of, you know, just cloth scraps. So she was heartbroken. But so the woman took her to a local shoemaker, and the old woman's eyes were so bad, her eyesight, that she couldn't see the pair of shoes that the shoemaker had in his case, and they were red, and they were made out of, like, it says, the finest leather, you know. And the little girl just was so excited, and he kind of winked at her, you know, like, I gotcha. And so the old woman didn't know, you know, that they were red shoes that he was gonna tailor and make just for her. So that's what happened. So she got these red shoes, and she went to church with the old woman, and of course it says the next day the church members were agog over the shoes on the child's feet. The red shoes shone like burnished apples, like hearts, like red-washed plums. Everyone stared, even the icons on the wall. Even the statue stared disapprovingly at her shoes. But she loved the shoes all the more. So when the pontiff intoned, the choir hummed, the organ pumped, the child thought nothing more beautiful than her red shoes. So she just loved them. She was so excited and happy, even though they, you know, they were, I guess, inappropriate, right, to wear to church. Everybody thought so, right? So it says by the end of the day, the old woman had been informed about her ward's red shoes, and she says never wear those red shoes again. So she the child put on her standard black shoes for the Oh, I'm sorry, it says the next Sunday she couldn't help but choose the red shoes again, okay, over the black shoes. So she, you know, the old woman thought she had worn the black shoes, but she didn't. So it says at the door to the church was an old soldier, this is interesting, with his arm in a sling. He wore a little jacket and had a red beard. He bowed and asked permission to brush the dust from the child's shoes. The child put out her foot, and he tapped the soles of her shoes with a little wig-a-jig-jig song that made the soles of her feet itch. Remember to stay for the dance. He smiled and winked at her. And it says, again, everyone, you know, was looking at the girl's red shoes, and she loved them so, and all this, okay? So, you know, during the music part of the service, she was just really busy turning her feet this way and that, it says. She forgot to sing. She was just, you know, starting to get into this dance, almost like this spell that this soldier, you know, put on her with the dancing related to the shoes. So, it says, as she and the old woman left the church, the injured soldier called out, "What beautiful dancing shoes." Okay, so again, this is him putting this this layer of meaning onto these shoes for her, that it's about dancing, right? And it says, his words made the girl take a few little twirls right there and then. But once her feet had begun to move, they would not stop. And she danced through the flower beds and around the corner of the church until it seemed as though she had lost complete control of herself. And that's kind of where the story goes from there. That she, and it just describes, you know, going everywhere she goes, you know, she just can't stop dancing. And it becomes, you know, very concerning to the girl, and she can't get the shoes off. And so I don't know the time frame here in the next part of the story, but the old woman, it says, as fate would have it, she became bedridden, and as soon as her doctors left, the girl crept into the room, or I think she did get them off. And then, but she wound up putting them back on, right? So she just couldn't help herself. It says she couldn't help herself. So once she got them back on, then they really wouldn't come off, okay? So, so she was just overcome when she had them on by the urge to dance. And so, excuse me. And so she, it says, it was terrible dancing. Excuse me, I'm still getting over this illness. It was terrible dancing, and there was no rest for her. And so then it says she danced into a churchyard, and there was a spirit of dread that would not allow her to enter. The spirit pronounced these words over her: "You shall dance in your red shoes until you become like a wraith? I'll pop the word up, I'm not sure. Like a ghost, till your skin hangs from your bones, till there is nothing left of you but entrails dancing. You shall dance door to door through all the villages, and you shall strike each door 3 times, and when people peer out, they will see you and fear your fate for themselves. Dance, red shoes, you shall dance." And so she begged for mercy, but before she could plead any further, her red shoes carried her away. And this is, you know, just the rest of the story is very short. You know, she just couldn't get them off, and it was torture. And she was caught up, you know, in the fate of this compulsive dancing. And so she finally made her way to the town's executioner. It says the axe on his wall began to tremble as soon as it sensed her coming near. It says, "Please," she begged the executioner as she danced by his door. And this is kind of brutal, so if you don't like you know, kind of shocking things, you might want to fast forward this part. Okay, so it says, "Please," she begged the executioner as she danced by his door, "please cut off my shoes to free me from this horrid fate." And the executioner cut through the straps of the red shoes with his axe, but still the shoes stayed on her feet. And so she cried to him that her life was worth nothing, and that he should cut off her feet. So he cut off her feet, and the red shoes with the feet in them kept on dancing through the forest and over the hill and out of sight. And now the girl was a poor cripple and had to find her own way in the world as a servant to others, and she never ever again wished for red shoes. So that's the story of the red shoes. And I'm gonna be honest with you, she breaks down the symbolism of this story, and it's so much richer than I would have ever imagined. So I hope that you hang with me through this chapter, because I think it's going to give you a lot of insight, give you a lot of things to think about. It's specifically aligned with and related to the experience of getting entangled with a narcissist. So there's just so much we can learn, and it's important to do this so that, you know, again, we can increase that discernment, and we can create a beautiful future for ourselves, you know. So the first section is called Brutal Loss in Fairy Tales. It is more than reasonable to ask why there are such brutal episodes in fairy tales. It is a phenomenon found worldwide in mythos and folklore. The gruesome conclusion to this tale is typical of fairy tale endings wherein the spiritual protagonist is unable to complete an attempted transformation. That's a powerful statement. Psychologically, the brutal episode communicates an imperative psychic truth. This truth is so urgent and yet so easy to disregard by saying, oh, I do understand, and then to go traipsing off to one's doom anyway, that we are unlikely to heed the alarm if it is stated in lesser terms. So, she basically talks about, she makes reference to, I don't know if you remember this old commercial, I do, from my childhood, where it shows like an egg in a frying pan, and it says this is what happens to the brain on drugs. So she kind of, you know, the point is to says, in the modern technological world, the brutal episodes of fairy tales have been replaced by images and television commercials. So that's like, you know, the extreme. And so it's important to sometimes show the extreme. And I've heard other coaches on YouTube talk about this, and I think I get it, you know, I understand. If you illustrate and highlight the extreme of something, a lesson, then it's going to stick. You know, even though it may not relate to you in that same, you know, level of being extreme. Still having this coughing episodes. That's always the lingering after effects, right? When you have cold. So it says the psychological truth in the red shoes, excuse me, is that a woman's meaningful life can be pried, threatened, robbed, or seduced away from her unless she holds on to or retrieves her basic joy and wild worth. The tale calls our attention to traps and poisons we too easily take onto ourselves when we are caught in a famine of wild soul. Without a firm participation of the wild nature, a woman starves and falls into an obsession of feel-betters, leave me alone, and love me please. When she is starved, a woman will take any substitutes offered, including those that, like placebos, do absolutely nothing for her, as well as destructive and life-threatening ones that hideously waste her time and talents or expose her life to physical danger. It is a famine of the soul that makes a woman choose things that will cause her to dance madly out of control, then too near to the executioner's door. And it reminds me of, you know, a lot of times I've heard, you know, instances where people get entangled with a narcissist when they are in a vulnerable state. You know, maybe they're fresh out of a divorce, or you know, just trying to escape. Maybe they're a young adult, you know, coming out of an abusive childhood home or something like that, you know, just coming out of a bad experience. You know, narcissists are looking especially for, you know, people like that who are in this situation she's talking about right here. And so sometimes this very state is what can lead a person into a narcissistic entanglement. And then on the other hand, sometimes someone can wind up being in this state coming out of a narcissistic entanglement. So, you know, this can apply in different ways. And then, you know, sometimes it may just be a brief episode, you know, when you exit. So it says, so in order to understand this tale further, we have to see how a woman can so drastically lose her way by losing her instinctual and wild life. The way to hold on to what we have, the way to find our way back to the wild feminine, is to see what mistakes a woman so trapped can make. Then we can backtrack and repair, which is what we're trying to do, right? We're wanting to see the traps, you know, ahead of time so that we don't fall into them. It says, then we can have reunion. So I'm going to go through and kind of give you the titles of the rest of the sections within chapter 8 so that you'll kind of know what we have to look forward to, because it's, like I said, it's so symbolic. It's so rich, and I know we're going to pull a lot from it. So the next section that we're going to review next time is called The Handmade Red Shoes. She talks about the symbolism of them. It says, in the tale, we see that the child loses the red shoes that she has fashioned for herself, those that made her feel rich in her own special way. She was poor, but she was innovative. She was finding her way. She had progressed from having no shoes to having shoes that gave her a sense of soul in spite of the difficulties of her outer life. And it says the handmade shoes are marks of her rising out of a mean psychic existence into a passionate life of her own design. And remember, the old lady burned her handmade shoes. So that's really interesting there. But she goes all into that section. And then it talks about the traps. Trap number 1. The gilded carriage, the devalued life. And this is certainly when you get ensnared, right? With a narcissist. Trap number 2, the dry old woman. The senescent, I think I'm saying that right. Senescent force. Senescent. I don't know, I'll have to look it up. Trap number 3, burning the treasure. Soul famine. Trap number 4, injury to basic instinct, the consequence of capture. Trap number 5, learning to sneak a secret life split in 2. Trap number 6, cringing before the collective, shadow rebellion. Trap number 7, faking it, trying to be good, normalizing the abnormal. Trap number 8, dancing out of control, obsession and addiction. And then at the executioner's house, trying to take the shoes off, too late. Returning to life made by hand, healing injured instincts. And those are all the sections for chapter 8. And again, the title is Self-Preservation, Identifying Leg Traps, Cages, and Poisoned Bait. So I hope this has piqued your interest for this chapter, and I'm excited to go through it with you and present it to you, and I hope you're just as excited as me. I hope you guys are doing well. Thank you for all the likes, the comments, and if you haven't subscribed, that would be great if you wanted to do so. I think it will help to help the algorithms to get these videos out to those who may benefit from them. So just thank you for all that and for walking this path with me. I hope you have a beautiful day, and I will see you soon.